Well, good evening. Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Taylor. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm Director of Communications for Copenhagen 2021, World Pride and Eurogames. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this online panel discussion talking about organising Pride in a hostile environment as part of Copenhagen Winter Pride. Pride is still a challenge in many countries in the world. There can be legal attempts by the mayor or municipalities or politicians to ban a Pride, and I think we'll hear about an example of that soon. They can be from far-right nationalist groups that attack Pride, such as we saw in Poland in 2019, and from religious groups who will use various different means to try and prevent Pride from happening. So we've got an amazing panel together tonight to talk about their experiences of organising Pride in hostile environments. And so I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and tell you who they are before we go into the questions. So first of all, Kristine, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello. My name is Kristine Garina. I am chair of Association Mosaica, which is the LGBTI organization in Riga, Latvia, and we are organizers of the Baltic Pride in Riga, and my pronouns she, her.
Thank you. Hadi.
Hi, my name is Hadi. I use the made pronouns he, his, him. As you said, I'm the founder of Beirut Pride, and I'm currently one of the 3 co-presidents of Pride.
Thank you. And Antonio. We can't hear you. No. That's a shame. Well, maybe we'll try you again in a second. We welcome your comments. We welcome your questions. You can either add them on Facebook as we go along, or you can send them by email to debate@copenhagenpride.dk. Debate is spelled the Danish way without an E on the end. DEBAT @copenhagenpride.dk. Antonio, should we try again? No. Okay, we can't hear Antonio. That's really strange. Well, let's hope that can correct itself, but we'll go straight into the first question. So, Kristine, can you tell us the background that led to you organising the first Pride in Riga, when it was, and what were the first challenges you faced?
Yeah, I didn't have much of a background in LGBT rights or even in human rights when I attended the first Pride in Riga. That was in 2005. I just went to see it as an observer without actually any expectations. And what I saw and what I experienced actually inspired me very strongly to get engaged in the movement and to change my career and my life and just do Pride. And that first Pride wasn't violent. Well, obviously, there are different levels of hostile and violent, sadly. And we were probably still much better off than other cities that literally got destroyed by the protesters and people were injured. We were only like thrown stones at and eggs at and hit over the head with an occasional Bible. Or I guess the most traumatic one from my experience, we got thrown bags full of excrements at us. But after experiencing this kind of hostility from my own society, from thousands of people who live next to me every day, that's how I decided I don't want to live in a country like that, and I don't want to live in a society like that. So I joined the movement in sort of an attempt to change that. And starting from the following year, I've been organizing prides in Riga ever since, and it actually got quite worse before it got better. And the first few years were very challenging, and there were moments that I was unsure and scared a bit, but there was never a moment I didn't want to do this anymore. So we just kept doing it, and here we are.
Great, thank you. And Hadi?
Honestly, we witnessed the debate about marriage equality in France in 2013 and in the US in 2015. And since we've been wondering why things were not properly moving forward in Lebanon. Article 534 of the Criminal Code of the country mentions that sexual intercourse that is against nature is punishable. And the mention is unclear, the mention of against nature. So prosecutors and judges have interpreted this to prosecute people that they suspect of engaging in non-heterosexual activities, namely homosexuals and transgender people. And this means arbitrarily arresting people, cracking down on venues with violence, humiliation, abuses in detention centers, in courts. And also when condemned for homosexuality, people carry the mention sodomite or sexual deviant or pervert on their police record for 10 years, which undermines employment opportunities, visa applications to countries, etc. So at the same time, since the 1990s, LGBTIQ+ people in Lebanon have been more and more visible. This led several organizations to open up, LGBTIQ+ businesses to flourish, and eventually the first edition of Beirut Pride to happen in 2017. And Pride is about visibility, which is very important to deconstruct myth, lies, and prejudice that surround LGBTIQ+ realities. So when you were thinking of Beirut Pride in the summer of 2016, we knew that you had to tap into the creative sector because there is universality in creation, in creativity. It makes things humane and it brings topics to the attention of people. We knew that people were already talking about LGBT matters in their private spaces, and you felt confident organizing a Pride in Beirut in May 2017, even though a lot of people and organizations didn't believe in it. And then it has been a tremendous success. More than 4,000 people attended the first edition of 2017. 2,700 people attended the first 3 days of 2018 before the prosecutor of Beirut arrested me and suspended the activities. We had grave threats later on, hate speech coming our way. However, the media reception has been instrumental, which is very important for the work we do. And in this context, our top priority has been and remains the decriminalization of LGBTIQ+ status.
Yeah, thank you. Antonio is going to restart his computer because apparently that should fix the issue. So we'll recap with Antonio when he reconnects with us. Kristine, where was the hostility coming from in 2006 and how organized was it? And what did they do to try and limit what was happening?
Well, where it comes from is a good question. I think it's just a complex history. It was 50 years of the Soviet occupation and the nationalism that we have in Latvia that followed that. I don't think it was that well organized the first year in 2005 because it was quite spontaneous and neither Pride organizers nor the protesters knew. But the next years, yeah, it was quite well organized. It was fueled by the politicians who saw that first Pride and the first protests and the first violence and saw it as a good topic how to build their political capital at that point. So they used that and they fueled a lot of homophobia by being openly homophobic in the parliament, by changing the constitution that first year when Pride happened and defining marriage between man and a woman, just to make a point, because no one was even suggesting any partnerships yet in Latvia, but that was just preventive action. And they teamed up with religious leaders, of course, as it happens in many countries. So politicians together with religious leaders saw it as a topic they can use. That was how they got organized. And obviously the biggest platform you can get is being a politician and having that parliament tribune and media, of course.
And did they condemn the violence, or was the people being violent just useful actors to their homophobia, and so were quiet about it?
At that time, it took a lot of political courage to even condemn the violence. There were a handful of politicians who actually said this is not okay. Very few, I still remember all of them, who actually did that. 5 people maybe who did that. And others, even if they thought it's not acceptable, nobody would speak out. Outside of public space, yeah, we heard from politicians privately, well, we can't support you openly, but we can tell you, yeah, we don't think it's okay. But it was very difficult for them to say that publicly for some reason for maybe next 10 years even.
Yeah. And Hadi, you mentioned about the prosecutor having you arrested to stop the event taking place. Was this a decision that they took themselves, or were they getting political pressure from politicians or from other actors to prevent Beirut Pride from going ahead?
The problem with Lebanon is that this is a country based on identity politics, which means you have 18 religious communities that share the country. People do exert all forms of pressure coming from religions, and the problem is not really religion itself, it's the political interpretation of religion. Yes, there were a lot of positive excitement around Beirut Pride, but also many people, many institutions were not happy, were not amused with this visibility. We were called deviants, we were called perverts, we were accused of changing the identity of Beirut. Homophobes and hate groups were aggressively vocal. They fabricated fake programs, which they attributed to Beirut Pride. They sent the police to crack down on us. Religious authorities publicly called against us at the high level, at the leadership level of the authority. And obviously, in such a climate, others will be encouraged to publicly post calls for death and threats targeting LGBTIQ plus people at large, but also the venues that were hosting our events. The threats were also economic, and they were of a big range of pressure. We documented all of this. All these calls are well put on the website of beirutpride.org, and they were shared with the President of Lebanon. But then recently, with the current economic collapse in Lebanon, the reality is very violent on LGBTIQ plus people, especially those of us who were already very vulnerable, such as trans people, non-conforming people, individuals already living in precarity. And so the urgency now is to cater to the basic needs of people. And the need is great, and ongoing numbers of ongoing assistance, assistance is ongoing, and the numbers for support are exponential.
Thank you. Antonio, I think, is back. Let's see if we have Duspoint from North Macedonia. Can you hear us, Antonio?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes. So let's go back to the beginning, and if you could introduce yourself and your pronouns and where you're from, and then that first question was the background to your first Pride, which is the most recent of the firsts. But just give us the background and the flavour of the hostility and the hassle you faced.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Antonio Mikhailov. I come from Skopje, from North Macedonia. I'm the organizing committee coordinator of Skopje Pride. We had our first Pride in Skopje 2019 in June on the occasion of 50 years of Stonewall riots. And the context was pretty peculiar because we had to have a Pride when we had a supportive coalition in power, meaning we had to have supporting politicians that have supported us every single time when we asked for support, mostly the former Minister of Labour and Social Policy and the MP Maya Morachani, who comes from the Greens. We had opposition in terms of some religious extremist right-wing clerical structures, but outnumbered by us. There were like 200 people protesting on the other side of the river where we were, and we had like nearly 2,000 people celebrating. So I think it was a really remarkable what we did 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago.
And it was also so Skopje and Sarajevo in 2019 were the last capital cities in the region to have their first prides, and I think apart from Azerbaijan, you're the last European capital cities not to have a pride.
Yeah, I would assume so. We like there's so many countries in the Balkans where we are, and we were like competing with each other. Who will be the last, or who will be the last to join? And although Sarajevo Pride announced their Pride before us, we organized it before them. So in a way, like I think both Sarajevo and Skopje Pride were the most successful first prides in the Balkan region, and this is why we are very happy for. because they had like nearly 3,000 participants and nobody expected that,
It's also not it's not a competition, so all prides are wonderful whenever and however they happen. Let's look at what's happened since. And Kristine, I want to ask particularly about Europride, because you were the first Europride in a former Soviet country in 2015, and the shift between then and then your Pride that followed in 2018. I was at both and really saw the shift in terms of the number of people, and the number of protesters was much smaller. So how did you get from missiles and violence in 2005 in 2006, to Europride in 2015?
Yeah, well, that first Pride was a bit of a mess. It was a very small march. I mean, in 2005, it was about 70 people, and I was one of them. And it went through the old town. The march, the route was through the old town. It was a very narrow streets and passed through lots of narrow old town gates. And basically several thousand people were protesting and chasing those 70 people trying to march. And all that got me my first, well, not experience, maybe the first view of how important Pride security is, which I learned as it happened. And then it got quite dangerous. It got to a point where a church let people in, the Pride marchers in. It was a friendly church with a friendly pastor who later was actually dismissed from this church because of that. He did help a lot of people to escape danger, and we left quietly one by one through a different door while that angry crowd outside was banging on the big front door of the church. So it was almost comical now when you look back on it, but of course it wasn't. But since that first Pride, we founded a new organization, which is actually 15 years old now this month. And what we started doing is we started thinking about Pride seriously, and thinking about Pride security seriously, and talking to the police, and talking to the city, and actually got quite bad the next 2-3 years. The Prides were banned. We went to court almost every year, but through many court cases and long process of negotiations and raising understanding, we finally got to good cooperation with the city, with the police. Well, it took years, and it was forced by the court orders at first, but the progress was made very slowly by not giving up and by keep doing it. And then the community started joining more and more, and Europride played a huge role in that. 10 years after the first Pride in 2005, we hosted Europride 2015 in Latvia. And the first year it was quite a struggle to get local people from the community in Latvia to join the march. There were so few of us, and the media attention was so intense. It was almost guaranteed you'll end up on the news if you join Pride. So it was uncomfortable for many people, but it changed. And especially with Europride, it changed, that it was actually cool to be seen at the Pride. Obviously not for everyone. It's still not safe for everyone to march, and it's still a struggle for a lot of people. But Pride in Riga grew from like 70 people to 8,000 people. And those 8,000 were local community members. And I think that makes me very emotional still, that they trusted that they can march in Riga safely. And Europride, I think, gave them that safety and that trust that we're not alone. We're not just one of the last 2 countries in EU in terms of LGBTQI rights. We are with Europe here. So we are on basically just raised ourselves to European average in terms of LGBT rights, because we have all those other countries behind us. So that was a big inspiration for local community to actually join the Pride.
Yeah, Antonio, given that you're the most recent of the firsts here, what did you do? How did you deal with the question of security in Skopje? Was it through relationships with police, with diplomatic missions? Because there is a key tool that every Pride organizer knows in their toolbox, which is that if you want security at your hostile Pride, get some diplomats there, because then the police will protect the event. It's kind of playbook 101, but I don't know whether that worked for you, or whether you had any other means of adding to the security for the event.
Yes, I think you clearly said the secret. In a way, we had a very good cooperation with the police, and the participants, many of them were saying like we did not notice any police officers while we were marching, and this is why, because many of them were not using uniforms, and it was really giving the feeling that it's a safe place to be and a safe march to go on, to walk on. Although, of course, there were many representatives from the diplomatic missions and embassies, and I guess this also strengthened the need for ensuring that this would be a safe and secure Pride. So we managed to have that done. And the
Hadi,
police was very...
Oh, okay. Sorry, Hadi. I was going to ask: Did you have any diplomats at Beirut? I know you haven't had a march as such, but have you had that same level of support?
We do have the support of diplomats, but the stakes are so high in Lebanon with all what they need, to all the political transactions that are happening, that when the police cracked down Beirut Pride in 2018, diplomats called each others and they told them, the police just arrived, don't come. So some diplomats just went back home because they didn't want things to escalate. However, in their houses, in their embassies, in their offices, they did some outreach. They had personal conversations with people in the police. They had personal conversations with ministers and so on. But it's a different dynamic. Beirut Pride is still the only Pride to take place in the Arab world, which for many is a great thing, but the responsibility is very high, and it is very important that other Pride take place in countries in the region. So the conversation and the discourse is not limited with the label of import or forms of what they call neo-imperialism or whatsoever. And this is a very wrong, fallacious, and subverted way at looking at things, because visibility is not the propriety of any nationality and any continent. We all want to live in dignity. We all want to tell the world that this is who we are, this is what we do. And the LGBTIQ plus people are of all horizons, of all orientations, of all cultural references, of all this is not being LGBTIQ plus is not an ideology, and this is what we really need to tap into for people to understand that it's the same. Like your sexual orientation, your gender identity is a minor thing in your participation as a citizen or as a human being.
We've had I'm just going to read you a comment we've had on Facebook. It's from Lars, not the Lars we all know, but another Lars, who says, you are all so cool and you all rock. So that's good to know. Within the community, though, there can sometimes even be hostility and opposition to Pride from people who say, I wish you'd just be quiet and not make a fuss and not take over the streets. And actually, it's something that one of Kristine's colleagues, Jana, mentioned in the brilliant Copenhagen 2021 You Are Included podcast this week. And she talks about how there is a split in Riga between those people who think Pride is a good thing and those who would rather we didn't take to the streets. Have you had that, Hadi, as well? Has there been opposition from within the community to Beirut Pride?
Totally. Lebanon is very polarized. And no matter how you look at it, you see a lot of diversity, but in a small country, in a small territory, a lot of diversity, especially when it is not properly managed, when people don't want to put egos aside to look at the final goal, which is, in our case, the decriminalization of LGBTIQ plus status. This is the cornerstone, because imagine that the moment that you are in a country like Lebanon, where, and this is not only Lebanon, 68 other countries criminalize LGBTIQ plus status. The moment you're there, regardless of your nationality, you can be prosecuted for being who you are. And originally, it happens with the police thinking that you walk in a certain way, you talk in a certain way, your look are not as they believe they should be, and they just invite you over for coffee for coffee. They just ask you to, to pass by the police station, and often they take your phone, they go through your applications, they go through the photo gallery, and everybody comes from a different background, have different orientations. So eventually, when there are no much places for people to exchange, to debate, and to focus on one common goal, to agree on one common goal, and most importantly on how to get there, there is dissonance. But regardless, you understand the impact of our energy, and all what we need to do is to channel it. We've been making some great progress on this. We had conversations that were not comfortable. We had a lot of deception. We had a lot of traction that make you feel going through unfair situations. It's very important to tap into the experience of people who came before us, because you would realize that when we really work together, when we really build on each other's progress, we can really move forward in a much more cohesive and impactful way.
Antonio, did you get complete support from the community in Skopje, or was there some opposition?
As it was the first Pride, we were expecting that we'll not get that much support. But the support we got was really appreciated, especially when it comes to the volunteers, because most of them were LGBTI, especially young LGBTI people coming from all over the country. We also got comments because we heavily cooperated with the police, as it was really important to have a safe and secure event. We had some comments from some of the typical community members who criticize, sometimes very useful, sometimes not that useful at all, saying that we should not cooperate with the police because the Pride developed as a protest against the police raid that were in Stonewall, having no in consideration that this is a completely different context and completely different values and norms prevailing in the country. So I would say we are very happy, not only from the support we got from the community members, but also from the other neighboring prides like Thessaloniki Pride, Sofia Pride, Pristina Pride, Montenegro Pride, Belgrade Pride. Not only the Balkan Prides, but also in the north, especially Oslo Pride. Their representative came a couple of weeks before the event to help us better plan and better execute the Pride itself, which was really helpful in a lot of ways. So we're really happy. We're really happy with the outcome.
Kristine, what about the community in Riga? What does that rift in the community look like, and how does that impact on Pride?
I don't think it's that dramatic in Riga. Of course, there are people for whom it may be inconvenient because they're quite comfortable living in the closet and not being bothered by anyone. And they're obviously not everyone has to march at the Pride. Not every LGBTQI person needs to be at the Pride, and there can be different views of that. And there are probably different ways to get where we want to get. It may take 200, 300 years without public events like Pride, and maybe some people have patience and time to wait for it, so they want to. But then other people who want to live today and who want to get married today and who want to be out with their partner today, for them it's important to do Pride, so that other part of the community doesn't have to be included or engaged if they don't want to. So, but the Pride will still go on. It will just speed up things, and if people don't want that, well, too bad. Not everybody will march.
Yeah, I always say, if you don't like Pride, then don't come to Pride. No one's
Exactly.
forcing you. So Hadi, if you were giving advice to someone setting up another Pride in the Arab world, wherever that may be, what would be the advice that you'd be giving them in terms of the likely challenges and hostility that they're going to face, and how do they overcome that?
Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Trust your intuition. Study very well the file that you are defending. And constantly surround yourself with people who love you and who want the best, not only for you, but also for the work you're doing. The work we do is a public work. It's work that reverberates on many levels in society. And actually what we did in Beirut Pride is we devised a multi-sectoral framework to address the decriminalization of LGBTIQ plus status. We understand that you cannot only get the CSOs and the NGOs work on the decriminalization. They are not the only component to do this. You need to involve the legislative sector, the executive sector, the judiciary. You need to include academia, the media, the influencers, the religious people, LGBT individuals, our parents, our friends, the people we work with. This is a society endeavor, and we should not shy away from this. We should be very strong, fierce, and while being polite, gentle, understand that everybody has their own path, but this is something to be very adamant about. Christina said it very well. Pride will continue. It's a very important performance of visibility, because it's only through visibility that you get a seat at the table. Things are not always perfect, but we need to understand that at a table of homophobes, I'd rather have one seat rather than have no seat at all for LGBTIQ plus people there. We must be part of the societal conversation. We live in society, and this is my advice to move forward.
A word that people often use to describe people like you, Hadi, who organise Pride somewhere like Beirut is brave. Do you feel brave, or do you think you're something other than brave?
I never understand people when they bump into me when I meet them when we're abroad, etc., and they said, you have so much courage, you're so brave, etc. Perhaps also some people in Lebanon blame me for being too idealistic, which I still don't understand. I don't really get what they mean. But there are things that we need to do. There are things that we need to contribute to. It's really our social duty. And we're not doing this because of altruism, because we want to look and appear good. We're doing this because it's always a tribute to ourselves when we were younger. It's always a tribute to honor the path, to give a word to those who are grow to the coming generation, so they do not go through what we've been going through. I'm 32 years old today. I have definitely not gone through bad things that people older than me have gone through. And my responsibility is to ensure that impact is delivered in a sustainable way, so people who are younger than me do not go through what I go through. And every generation has a role to play.
And so based on your experience, Antonio, what's the piece of advice you'd give to somebody setting up their first Pride in a hostile city or country? And are you brave? Two questions in one.
I think Hadi mentioned really well a few points that I would also cover now. First, our advice is that there has to be some support from the central and the local government. So without them, we don't organize a Pride. And second, I'm in the activism for human rights, but also, more specifically, because it makes me feel good, and it makes me feel that I'm doing something right or something good for the others. And I feel happy, and that's the key for any job you have. Although I don't see this as a job, just an excitement and something that makes me feel really fulfilled in my life, like I have a kind of a mission. So just pick the best people around you. Do prepare for the critics and the feedback and the opposition, wherever it may come from, and appreciate any kind of little support you get. I personally remember one specific moment. It was the last day before the Pride. It was Friday evening, afternoon. I was still in the office, and on Saturday there was the Pride. So a person who is running a flower shop in Skopje rang me on the phone and asked me if she could give me some flowers without any connection with me or anybody else from the team. And I said, okay, but why would you like me to receive the flowers? Well, you're doing a really good job with Skopje Pride, and we're, giving away flowers, and these flowers is called like bouquet of happiness. So why don't you get it? Okay, then I will be there and I will pick it up. It really made me feel that even, you know, some people who you don't even think of have noticed it, and that really motivates you. Yes.
I'm glad that had a happy ending. I was expecting that for you to say it was an explosive bunch of flowers or something, and it didn't have a good ending. But that's a positive. Kristine, what's in the top tips you'd give someone organising a Pride in somewhere hostile?
To keep going, to keep doing it, because it can feel very discouraging the first few years, and you really want to give up, and you don't get any support from the community, and sometimes even from your allies. And I remember the first maybe third year or second or third year, when we did manage to have like a pride parade, pride march, but it was within a fenced park, because that was the only compromise we could do with the police. And even our friends and even our allies said, this is not a victory, this is not a pride, this is a zoo, you're fenced inside the park. But without that, the next Pride wouldn't happen when we managed 200 meters on the street outside that park. Without those first steps that we had to go through, we wouldn't have 8,000 people in amazing Pride in 2015. So you have to go through these first really difficult steps when nobody believes in you yet. That's really important, not to stop. And we felt, maybe I felt like in 2-3 years in, when I thought, well, I should just give up. But then I thought someone else will have to start over from the start and go through that again, and it will delay everything by 5 years again. So just my advice would be just keep going.
Good. So a comment and a question that have come in from Facebook. The first one is from our friend Christine Andy Harley, who says that Riga Pride has another little-known first in international terms. He can't remember the year, but an embassy in Riga was the first embassy anywhere in the world to fly a rainbow flag for Pride. Which embassy was it, and what year was it?
That is true. That's British Embassy.
Oh, excellent. We used to do things properly.
I can't remember the year.
We can't remember the year, okay. And we have a question from William, who I think I know. How loud have the voices of straight allies been in support of your prides? Let's start with Hadi, because I guess I know the answer to this. So how helpful have straight allies been in Beirut Pride?
Very important, because as I said earlier, in the framework that we devised, you gain much more when you have people who are not LGBTIQ+ join this this path that we are working on. And the voice is strong, of course, because at the end of the day, it's what we're doing is we're communicating. We're talking to people, we're talking to people who have prejudice, people who look down on you. We're talking with individuals. We want to understand our realities, our very different and multiple realities. And while some of them will not talk directly to you, they would hear another straight person. They would be more sensitive to what we do through another straight individual. Parents of LGBTIQ+ individuals are very sensitive when they speak to a religious person, when they speak to a clergy person who is in support or who speaks about the dignity and respect that we owe to everybody, including LGBTIQ+ people. These are very strong moments, strong words that always come back to our to our kitchen, where all the personal conversations, the uncomfortable ones, usually take place between between siblings, with parents, etc. So let's not underestimate the power of people of different horizons, of different orientations. Let's leverage all what we can get. We have no time, luxury to do economy on this thing.
Yeah. Kristine, what about straight allies for you?
Obviously very important. I think especially in hostile environments and in cities where it's more difficult to organize Pride, sometimes it's much easier for straight allies to march than it is for LGBTQI community to do so. And we experienced that as well the first years when there were lots of straight allies who marched with the few LGBTQI people who dared to do that. So that support is really amazing. And also in Europe Pride, we had, I think the biggest group we had was the straight allies in Europe Pride. It's very important for society to see as well.
Yeah. And Antonio?
Well, I think definitely, of course, the straight cis majority, it's a fact in society, and of course, we must have as many as possible of them. However, it's important that the LGBT members, community members themselves, also are resilient and proud of who they are. That they are not, hiding or being insecure or keeping that for a long term, because we have only one life, and it's important that we live it authentically. I think it's actually a very complicated issue. It's rooted in the patriarchal and heteronormative society that we live in, the norms and values. And when we address LGBT rights and we organize pride parades, we also create spaces of freedom for women, especially women who are marginalized. We also create space for vulnerable communities like other ethnicities, like Roma people or people with disabilities, and so many other who also find their spot in our Pride marches, so together with us.
Yeah. A comment that I've just had, Istanbul lost its Pride March for the last 6 years, as we know. We only understand the value of Pride when we lose it, which is a very, very true point. There's lots of people watching from across Europe, not just in Scandinavia, but across Europe. What can people in supposedly safe countries or in cities where it's easy or comfortable to organise a Pride, what can they do, and what can the Pride organisations and what can civil society do to support you in Riga, in Skopje, in Beirut? Let's go to Antonio first. What support can you be given from other people around the world?
I think any type of support is helpful, especially when it comes to finding innovative, creative ways how to mobilize and organize, in particular community members. We know it's a process. We work most with the mental health of LGBT community members, because those are the issues that are really underserved and under-addressed in our community. And this is how we build activists, because once an LGBT community member realizes that what they're doing is not healthy, and finds a way to change it, and then they're motivated to bring more people into the movement. So this is an issue that needs to be addressed as well as among our supporters from across the globe, in particular the privileged, countries or societies like Western Northern Europe or North America. So mental health for LGBTI is important.
Absolutely. And another question that's actually just come in but kind of speaks to the same thing. So I'm going to move on to Kristine and ask this question as well, which is how helpful are Pride tourists in supporting Pride in hostile environments? I mean, I obviously came to Riga in 15 and 18, and you might wish I hadn't. But are Pride tourists helpful in those situations or not? And back to that previous question Antonio just answered as well, about how can people support from abroad?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have to worry about it too much right now, about the Pride tour. That's quite sad. That's very helpful, and a lot of Pride organizers in cities like Riga get criticized a lot, because you get a lot of international support, so you get a lot of international guests marching, and it may seem like they can take over the Pride March. But if you think about 150 foreigners or Pride tourists and 50 locals, 50 locals would feel alone. I mean, that gives them the safety, and they can. And so we had to have the first year's big delegations of Amnesty International. 150 people from Amnesty International in their T-shirts would march, and somebody from Riga could put on an Amnesty T-shirt and hide within that group and still march and not get noticed. And I think that's very, very powerful, and that's what Pride tourists can do for local people. So that can't be underestimated. And what was the question? How we can be supported?
Yeah, so how can Pride in safe countries or safe cities support, and how can individuals support you other than by coming?
It's asked often, and there's no simple answer, but I can give you a really simple answer. Give us money, support us financially, because we're always struggling. We don't get sponsors or commercial floats, so we basically get no income from Pride, and it is financed through our other activities, which is quite opposite of what happens in other countries. But that's not everything, obviously. We need political support, political pressure. That always works, for my country at least. The EU pressure, pressure of our international partners. So always bring this up when you're talking to your politicians, so they can bring it up when they talk to our politicians, and ask them to ask these questions on official visits and in official meetings. Like, what exactly are you doing to help LGBT people in Latvia? Are you side in your country? Like, if you're a government minister, are you joining Pride March in your country? And I know in many countries you need to stop politicians from waving their flags too much at the Pride, but like for us, it still matters that they express their support so openly. And another thing that everyone can do is just shame countries like ours for being homophobic, like everywhere you can, because the society and the politicians in our countries need to see that it's not accepted. It's not accepted from our closest allies. It's not accepted from our friends. And, friends are very important in our uneasy geopolitical situation, considering where we are and considering our history. We need our friends. So, yeah, do shame us for that.
Yeah, so visibility. So Hadi, what about Beirut? How can someone in Copenhagen or London or Paris support you? And do you want Pride tourists at the next Beirut Pride?
I was reading an article about the importance of tourism to create societies that are inclusive. I myself was very critical of Pride, but eventually we often criticize what we do not know. So criticism is welcome, especially when it is constructive, when it allows us to move forward. But it's very important also that we get something done for us to be able to criticize. I will echo Antonio, I will echo Christina. For in the case of Lebanon, I will answer in 2 moments. First, about the decriminalization of LGBTIQ+ status. First, ensure that your politicians and diplomats speak to the officials they meet in Lebanon about the importance of decriminalization. The Lebanese criminal code, as I said, also applies to visiting LGBTIQ+ people. So it is the duty of all governments to ensure that their citizens are protected in the countries they go to. In the specific case of Lebanon, our politicians do listen to foreign representatives, to diplomats, which is something that we must leverage. And second, be vocal about the fact that people are still criminalized for whom we love in more than 68 countries. And that every visiting person, every tourist, every person living in Lebanon may be prosecuted for non-heterosexual practice. And then finally, engage with the media, because there's a reason it is called the fourth estate or the fourth power. And also, we know that the current economic collapse of Lebanon is very violent on people. To give you an example, a lot of individuals cannot purchase medication, go to the hospital for lack of money. They have outstanding medical bills to pay. There is no unemployment support in the country. There is no assistance for business that closed because of COVID. What we did is we devised a large database of institutions, of people who want to directly help, who want to directly support. We also connect individuals in need to all forms of NGOs. to individuals who have the capital, whether it is financial or moral or network, to help and to support. We do this with discretion, we do this with honor, because it's important that we uphold the dignity of people who are already exhausted. On our website, beirutpride.org, under the page donations, there are there is comprehensive information, so feel free to check it out if you want to know more about how best to support.
So the answer from all three of you in different ways was two things. It was money, and it was visibility. Everybody can create visibility because of social media, and we can, you could carry a Latvian flag or a Lebanese flag in a pride parade, or you could carry a sign that says, I'm marching for the people who can't in Poland at the moment, or, there are ways of doing that. But to put money, I want to put the money into perspective. Because I know how much it costs to organise a major pride like London or Copenhagen, but just off the top of your head, Kristine, what's the cost to Mosaica of delivering a pride in Riga in 1 year?
Well, we're very creative, and I'm sure my colleagues will say the same. And we will organise it with whatever we have. I mean, we can organize it from, like, if we have 5,000 euros up to 100,000 euros, we'll make a pride. It just depends how what events we'll be able to put on, how many events we'll be able to put on. Will they be secure? Will volunteers have water? It's a different. We know how to work with very little money. But yeah, if we have the first pride we organized, if I remember correctly, was about 5,000 euros.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. Antonio, what was the budget for Skopje in 2019?
It was 24,000 euros. We managed to get a lot of support from a lot of different sources of support. We even had a fundraising campaign for community members who lived abroad. We also had a lot of support from the diplomatic missions and embassies here in Skopje. And we also had the support from some of the typical donors that we usually have in our work. Unfortunately, I think sustainability of organizing Pride is secured when the state finances it. When we reach that point, I think we will be okay with what we have achieved, because that means the state has stood behind us and has considered and is prioritizing Pride and the LGBT movement within the whole wider equal rights campaign that is going on for a lot of other issues and communities as well.
And Hadi?
I always like to say that Beirut Pride is self-funded. One of the things I do when I'm not doing Pride is, I teach how to organize events at university, and I very much focus on budgets. And also, you know me, I'm a big mouth. So what I did is, in 2017, we reached out to our friends and we literally whipped them into giving us spaces for free, food and beverage for free, and other things for free. In 2017, at the first edition of Beirut Pride, we organized 25 different events for $2,000. Obviously, it was the first edition. People were very happy to participate, to pitch in, but we know it's not sustainable. The challenge of getting money from other institutions is that you lose your freedom, you lose your liberty. At a certain moment, you believe that it becomes charity. It becomes, they don't deal with you at the same level. For them, for many people, especially big international organizations, it becomes a power, like a balance of power, like we give money, but in return we want to do other things. And unfortunately, the history of a lot of individuals in Lebanon on very much different societal matters, not only on the LGBT matters, have been people who wanted to improve their conditions, who found a way to make money out of forms of activism. And I had promised myself and a lot of people around me that we would not take the same path. It is not always sustainable, it's very frustrating, but we believe that the country of Lebanon is rich. It's impoverished, but it is rich, and people must contribute in various forms and ways if we really want things to move forward.
Absolutely. So let's try and end with some positivity, because this has been quite a depressing 55-minute conversation. So let's have some. What are the good things? What are the reasons that you keep doing what you do? What's the best thing? The moment you want to share? And we've got maybe 30 seconds each on this. So what's one of the good things that's happened as a result of your Pride? Let's go with Antonio first.
I think the significant moment that kind of marked my experience after the Pride was that there were random people on the street or even on Facebook commenting. This was the most exciting thing and the best protest or demonstration or rally ever organized in the past couple of years. I missed going to these kind of markets and I missed attending these kind of events. So thank you. And I think this is from a random person giving you a compliment on what you did. It really makes you feel good about what you did.
Yeah. Hadi?
The grit of organizing Pride, of having people come together. In 2017, when we started Beirut Pride, we received a message from this young girl who lives in the north of the country. She said that she was crying when she saw the tweet of Beirut Pride saying that it is taking place, and her mother, entered her room at that moment, and she was very worried. She was asking her, "Why are you crying?" And then the girl was panicking. She didn't know exactly what to say, and then she decided to come out to her mother and to tell her, "Well, Beirut Pride is taking place, and by the way, I'm lesbian, etc." And that was a very intense moment. And then she said that her mother hugged her and told her that I love you and don't worry about this and so on. So when we realized the impact and and this beautiful contribution that we make from our kitchen tables, from our living rooms, from our offices, from our mobile phones, we realize the importance of our work, and it's just magic.
It's a great story. It is magic. Kristine?
I don't know what to say after that, Hadi. I'm not going to share the best thing, that will remain private. But the second best I can share, the moment when, after 9 years of being told we'll never march on the central street of Riga, when we finally in 2015 turn on that central street of Riga and march on it, and that was a big moment for me. And I know my colleagues who organized it with me, because we discussed it later, that moment when we turned on the central street of Riga. Yeah, we've been told we'll never do that.
I had an experience in Riga in 2015, which will always stay with me. It's not the most moving thing that's ever happened to me at a Pride, but it was the fact that the incredibly angry-looking police officers who were surrounding the park with their back to the park, arms in arms, so they were a human perimeter. If you looked very closely at their boots, the brand of boot was XXL, which I just thought was marvellous for police looking after a Pride venue. We've had lots more comments coming in. Idea about we should pair Prides together, so we should have, for example, Copenhagen and Istanbul should be paired together so that they can provide mutual support. I know that idea has had lots of people talking about it in the past. Lots of creativity, people saying thank you for the inspiration. And the British Embassy in Azerbaijan flies the rainbow flag on the 17th of May every year. So that's really positive. I want to end just by mentioning, because it's a historic document now. This is 15 years old, published by ILGA Europe. A toolkit for producing Pride in a hostile environment. It's so old that there's a very young Kristine in there, but if you Google that document, it is available online, and I think it's the type of thing that we should actually look to produce a new version, because there are more Prides than we've ever had, and it would be a really good thing for us to reproduce. So this is really weird because we don't have an audience to clap, but I can assure the three of you that people are clapping across the world. But I want to thank Kristine, Hadi and Antonio for taking part. It's been a really interesting session. And it will be available online so you can watch back and share it in future. But thank you all for joining and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.